Welcome to Inside the Beltway with Star Parker here on Urban Family Talk. Open to all, but particularly a safe place for the 30% of blacks that poll as evangelical and conservative. It's a safe place where you can get insight and information here on Inside the Beltway with Star Parker. Glad to be with you again. Oh my, we had an interesting day yesterday here in Washington, D.C. Thousands of immigrants and activists flocked to the U.S. Capitol to urge the Congress to overhaul the immigration system for the more than 11 million people living in the U.S. illegally. And I'm saying it like that because I got caught up in that traffic. You know, it's interesting, Washington, you have a protest all the time on almost every corner sometimes. Between the homeless, you have protesters. Often they're union organized, so you can see some of the same faces because it's just a profession where you're paid to hold a sign all day outside of someone's business and or lobby firm or a association that you're disagreeing with or that the unions are disagreed with. And so they have it's a business. It's where you can be paid to protest. But that's not all of what happened yesterday. Even though there were bus loads and a lot of union activities behind the protests that were at the nation's capital, but there were multiple thousands of immigrants that were actually there and activists that were actually there because I got caught in that traffic on my way to a meeting, was 10 minutes late for that meeting, and it cost me an extra $5 because we had to go around much of the where the police had barricaded off the streets. And so it's interesting to see. And as others and the news are reporting that you had all types of ethnicities there. You had Asian coalitions as well that were saying, well, don't forget us. We're 1 in 10 of the immigrants that are here illegally. And the reason they came here yesterday is because the so-called gang of 8 senators working on immigration were expected to introduce a piece of legislation by the end of this week. They've been months of negotiating. We've heard all about it. Senator Marco Rubio has been the face of this negotiation for this gang of 8 because he himself, I suppose, could check the box Hispanic or Latino since he has he's an immigrant. Well, his parents were from Cuba. That in itself fascinates me. That if you declare yourself Hispanic, all you have to do is have Spanish speaking in your heritage because these are separate and individual countries with unique challenges, each and every one of them, but we decided to categorize them all into a political term, Hispanic and or Latino. So they're negotiating this particular piece of legislation but they had to announce yesterday, unfortunately, to all the immigrants and activists that had flocked to Washington, D.C. to urge them to please do this on behalf of all of our kin folks who have snuck in the country illegally. They had to postpone that particular reform introduction because of the gun control debate, which we talked about here yesterday and will continue to talk about because they, as I told you, Inside the Beltway will address 4 different categories. Traditional values will be one of them, limited government, free markets, strong national allegiance and defense. And so, when you think about the gun debate, we're talking about limiting the role of government. Government is already too much in our lives, and we really should not allow them to overrun the Second Amendment. But today we're going to talk about free markets because that's where this categorizes itself when we look into the immigration discussions and why the gang of 8 senators are insistent that they must do something. It seems the way of Washington these days to take issues that are huge and complex, devise comprehensive mega reforms, too massive for any single person to read or grasp, and then pass a new law that exchanges one set of problems for a different and sometimes even bigger problems. And we just finished going through these types of reforms with the financial services system that is unbelievably messed up now, and we'll probably do a show about that particular situation in the future. The healthcare system, of course, we're going to be doing several shows about that because we saw this massive reform and comprehensive type of environment and ended up with Obamacare, thousands of pages that we needed to read after they passed it into law. And now we're about to do the same thing on immigration. It's unbelievable. When you hear the word comprehensive come out of Washington, run to your phone and to your Twitter and to your email and to get in touch with your legislator and say, no, every time you hear the word comprehensive and or universal, because the devil is indeed in the details. And it's unrealistic to think that with one new law, we can secure the border, deal with the 11 million illegal immigrants now in the country, devise a new way to allow skilled workers to enter the country, and create a strategy to employ the unskilled foreign labor. But that's what they're trying to do. That's Washington. They want to do it all. And it's another legislative disaster waiting to happen. And, when it comes to matters of the economy, free markets, I could be categorized politically, I suppose, as a libertarian. We hear that term often, especially those that believe in free markets, free trade, and limited government. And I believe in all three. So I could be there, but I must confess, our Latino neighbors have challenged my libertarian instincts regarding immigration reform. In fact, they've challenged my instincts regarding, as a Christian, my Christian instincts. Because we know as Christians that we're supposed to be charitable to the poor and to the foreigner, be hospitable, and to the stranger, to find out what it is that they need. My producer, Daniel, and his brother, he's a twin, believe it or not. I've got two of them here in Washington, D.C. They try to sneak and pretend that they're each other, especially if one has to be at work at one time and the other has to be at work another time. And I know the difference. I can tell a twin. But anyway, Daniel and his brother, they do extensive work in the Latin countries in South America through their ministry and through the ministry of their church, which is still in Florida. And so, there's a heart in Christianity for the immigrants. In fact, recently I was at my daughter and my son-in-law's church in Los Angeles, and the pastor made an appeal for another offering because of the families who've had, their husband or in some situations, their sons deported. Because in Los Angeles, we're seeing a lot of deportation because, there's this aggression from the left now to say, well, since they're from the right, they're insisting we close the border first. We need to make sure that they think we're being serious about deportation and serious about the border so that then we can open up the border and allow for amnesty and other ideas. And so they've been very aggressively under the Barack Obama administration, making sure that they do the law, implement the law and deport. And so we're looking at what now, close to 400,000 deportations a year since he's been in office. And that's affecting real families. We get it. We know that. In fact, those families, I'm sitting right amongst them. They had some of the women come up with their children and pray. And it's a difficult time. But I tell you, these recent and past pro-immigration demonstrations around the country have been a major turnoff. There's something that's just not convincing about illegal immigrants demonstrating to claim that they have inalienable rights to come here, to be here, to work here, to become citizens here, and then to make all these claims in Spanish. Hearing "we shall overcome" in Spanish just doesn't provoke my sympathies. I don't buy that. Along with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, our Creator endowed anyone with the right to sneak into another person's country, to sneak into the United States, bypass our laws, and set up shop. Obviously, our immigration laws need fixing, but this is a discussion for the American citizens in English. And I know that people have a right to come here and protest. We see it all the time, and there are protests all across the country again. I think the last time we saw these major demonstrations all across the country, and when thousands were coming out in, what was it, 2006 or so, and they were waving the Spanish flag. They had such a backlash on that I didn't see many Spanish flags at this particular rally that was held here in Washington, D.C. yesterday. But I saw the numbers. And this is a discussion that Americans need to have in English. And we need to have this discussion. We do. This could be a fine hour for the political class in America to convince the right that illegal immigration is a right, I suppose. That the illegal here are innocent victims, and that the real guilt lies with the U.S. citizen who believes our laws mean something and should be enforced. It could be their political hour. But draping these bogus claims in the garb of the civil rights movement is particularly annoying. And then to say anyone that would say, wait a minute, what about our laws? What about our country? What about getting to that border first and foremost? For them to be shunned out of the discussion, set on the sidelines and called racist and bigoted, while we're having this difficult situation in a difficult environment now with the economy totally collapsed, and we have to have these discussions, I think that the American citizen should be able to participate without someone saying, you don't have a right because of your ethnicity to weigh in on what's driving this illegal immigration, what's driving the immigration reform discussions, what's driving the need for people that are exempted out of minimum wages and promoting through the unions prevailing wages, which we will talk about because this is a real challenge if that ends up. There's discussion that it's in the bill, but we haven't seen the bill yet. But if there is opportunities to expand Davis-Bacon in this, we'll have that discussion, and I'll even explain to you what Davis-Bacon is. But I can't do that right now because we don't know the details of the bill, so I'm not going to jump one before I know what's in it. But I do know that the civil rights movement was about enforcing the law, not breaking it. And that's one of the reasons it's particularly annoying that not just this people group, but we see the homosexual activists do it and any and everybody else trying to grab hold of the civil rights movement and their language and then use it to make a case that is just inconsistent with what the very movement was about. The Civil War amendments to the Constitution were not getting the job done in what had been a long struggle in this country to treat blacks as human beings. And as we talked about it the other day, we started seeing the growth of Jim Crow and Black Code. And there was an opportunity for Americans to weigh in through civil rights legislation and say, not so, these are Americans. And the history and the legacy of slavery was deplorable, and we're trying to make corrections. So we're going to make them in law again. And we had a civil rights movement to say remove governmental barriers so that these human beings can live free. And if Americans were kidnapping Mexicans and selling them into slavery here, I might actually see the equivalence. But these are free people who choose to come here, and they choose to do so illegally. And we need to talk about this. We need to be able to say, at least let's be honest about what we're dealing with and why we're having to have this discussion again. And why so many are saying, no, we understand the dilemma we're in with 11 million here that are undocumented. We understand that there are children that were dragged across that border by their parents who have now grown up and went through the school and did all the right things, and now they're needing to go to college or want to go to college. What do we do with these families? That's one of the reasons it shouldn't be comprehensive. How are you going to have comprehensive legislation when you have some, it's kind of like what, it just reminded me of a scripture with Titus. He said, some you deal with compassion, but others you thrust out. So we can't look at the 5-year-old who was snuck in this country the same way that we look at the 50-year-old who is wreaking havoc by breaking and entering and doing all types of abusive behaviors and filling up our jails. There's nothing comprehensive about this. You can't do a bill that is just looking at the immigrant who's coming in from Bangladesh to study and to get a degree, and then to say the next move is you have to leave and you take those talents back home, as opposed to saying, is there a pathway to citizenship for you here? This is not the same discussion. This cannot be in the same bill. And frankly, when you start talking about what to do with those that are coming in on the low skill area to pick our berries and work our farms, to then say that you're going to be able to come up with some type of comprehensive plan for them and exempt them out of the laws that are created or in place for all other low-wage workers, to force them to compete with one another. We have enough competition between the blacks and the browns in our inner cities across this country. And the gang warfare is out of control because they think they're fighting for the same crumb. And now you're going to say, well, we have different rules for them. Well, how are you going to keep them from birthing their children here, which then become United States citizens? All types of questions come to bear when you start talking about a comprehensive illegal immigration plan. Star Parker here inside the Beltway. You can Twitter me at Star Parker. You can visit my website, urbancure.org. If you want to weigh in and get our newsletter, you can Facebook me at Star Parker for Freedom. We're going to talk about this today on Inside the Beltway with Star Parker here on Urban Family Talk. Oh, I love my intro song that the Voices of Liberty Choir created because it just reminds us of America. It just is so soothing to let us know that, especially as Christian people, we can still make a difference. I'm Star Parker here inside the Beltway on Urban Family Talk. And today we're talking about immigration reform. Because it's on the headlines. We want issues that are in the headlines brought to you, especially you, the conservative Christian, whether black or white, red or brown. If you say that Jesus is my Lord, you are adopting and in the process of adopting a biblical worldview, then this is talk for you. Because thousands of immigrants have come to Washington, D.C. to make their case heard since the Congress is attempting to overhaul the immigration system. All in one bill. Yep, again, here we go. Comprehensive reform. And I have nothing against protests. I enjoyed the opportunities to protest. Been in many a protest myself. I remember one time we were protesting for pro-life up in Boston, and it was right in the middle of the winter. So we're outside and we're doing our megaphone, and finally to make the crowd hear me, because it was getting larger and larger. And so the guys that had organized it said, well, here's your platform. And it was snow. You know how when they shovel their snow on the East Coast or in these snow states, they like pile it up and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger on the side of the road. And so I'm in my high heel boots and I'm climbing up on this mountain of snow. And I'm like, are you sure it's not going to come crash? It's like, it's snow. Believe me, it's not coming crashing. And it didn't crash. So I believe in protests. I love protests. I know that the Constitution says we have a right to protest. What I'm hoping, though, and the reason that I want to engage you in issues of public policy where our lives touch in the public square, why I want you as a Christian conservative who is adopting a biblical worldview involved, is because we need to make sure we have legislators here who ascribe to our values so that they're not tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, because the doctrines are here. We're here to protest, to show that there are loud voices for a particular issue or not. But some of these protests are so extremely organized now, it's business, that the drivers of that business might have a view inconsistent with our biblical worldview. And then we end up with legislators who just feel, well, we better do something to appease the American people. And so they end up voting for comprehensive reforms, whether it's financial services reform after the economy collapsed, people said, do something. Whether it's healthcare reform after people said, do something. And now it's immigration reform and gun control. That's the same reason that we're having those debates, and they're trying to take away our Second Amendment right. Because when you see 25-year-olds get shot down, American people say, do something. But you don't want to be reactionary, emotional. We want to look into the scripture. And the scripture says that when God seems hidden, and in situations where there's tragedy and suffering, he can seem hidden. And King Solomon told us, when God seems hidden, reach deeper for him. Look deeper for him. That's when you get quiet. Not loud. Not make aggressive decisions real quickly. A lot of that when people get them so meal and then they get divorced again. We see that a lot in pro-life, unfortunately. People get talked into having an abortion. They have an abortion, then they're sick in their stomach. They get pregnant again real quick, thinking that will make the pain go away. No, we don't want to be comprehensive in any type of reforms when there is a real tragedy, a real suffering. And when it comes to immigration in this country, this is tragic. And they're suffering. People are being deported. That means their families are not. And it's tragic. I mean, when you just consider the Mexicans that have come over the border, how can we understand they're taken to the streets in our country to demand rights and freedoms when they seem to have little interest in doing this in their own country, where they have the right to do it too? Mexico. There's no reason why Mexico, a country rich in beauty and natural resources, can't be as prosperous as the United States. None at all. It's just not happening because of a long history of mismanagement, corruption, excessive government. And although Mexico is a democracy, for some reason, Mexicans seem to need to be north of the Rio Grande to get politically active and demand the benefits of a free society. Mexico isn't working because far too many Mexican people vote for leftist leaders. And so for those that are in the party of the right, that think that, oh, wow, if we just compromise on this one and let's say, here's a green card. Oh, no, now we're going to give you a path to citizen. We'll just give you a fine. These are poor people. You're going to fine them. And how are they supposed to pay for this fine? Who are you think you're fooling to tell? Oh, well, no, we have this path to citizenship. And so for those that think, well, yeah, but then they'll vote for the right. Are you kidding? The right is about limiting government. Republicans are the party of no. Remember, it was birthed in abolitionists, by abolitionists. It was saying no to slavery, and it's been the opposition party since. Now, there might be a whole lot of elites that don't like it. It's kind of like, it reminds me of the people in the church. You know how God just saves you when you're wretched and sinner. But when some of the elite get saved, they want to make God out to be, this professional, and they polish it up. No, actually, it's kind of lowly and dirty. And the scriptures, boy, you get down inside of him and find out that he really used some interesting characters. Yeah, it wasn't all for the Harvard learned. And the same thing's happening here politically. They think, well, okay, well, these folks will just vote for us naturally if we just give them, their demands. Now, I'm a little suspicious because their demands, these are the same folks that are voting for leftist leaders in their own country, because when you're poor, you can easily buy into ideas of socialism. I run CURE. Many of you know the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, and we're a policy think tank here in Washington, D.C. We promote market-based solutions to fight poverty. So I look a lot at data. I look a lot at polling. And I'm telling you right now, on this area of socialism in the polls, while blacks poll high, Mexicans are off the chart. They actually believe in redistribution. They might not have heard yet that the concept of redistribution of wealth is inconsistent with a free people, especially in a country like ours that was birthed in freedom and personal responsibility. But that it's also inconsistent with the scripture, because the Bible says don't covet. Don't covet what your neighbor has. And redistribution of wealth is covetousness. Somebody has something somebody else doesn't have, so we hire politicians to go take it from them. And that's what this whole leftist movement is about, hiring politicians who will go take from others to make your life more comfortable. Instead of reaching deeper for the Lord and saying, Lord, what will you have me to do? How do I turn this fate, my poverty, into your great destiny of prosperity? What is it that you would have me to do? So just forgive me for being a little suspicious of this wholesome picture being painted of the folks who are pouring across our borders, allegedly to be free, to work, and to maintain traditional families. I mean, anyone who lives in Southern California, as I do, knows that the Latino immigrant community is far from this paragon of virtue that the forces keep telling us. That those that are encouraging open borders want us to believe. I see much of the same troubling behaviors that blacks get tarred with. Much of the gang behavior in Los Angeles, unfortunately, is Latino related. And it's pouring out now into Orange County, and they're having tremendous difficulties in the county below Los Angeles County, the little quiet bedroom county that sits between Los Angeles County and San Diego County that usually the immigrants just move through to get to Los Angeles. And people in California think it's a joke, and especially when people are visiting, think it's a joke when they see the signs that actually, they're like warning signs. You know how you have stop signs and other types of signs to show activity, deer crossing. We have, instead of deer crossing, when you're down toward the Mexican border in San Diego and all the way up to Orange County, instead of deer crossing signs, we have signs that show a woman with a child, pulling the child, so that people will slow down on the freeway, because that's what could be crossing. People that have just snuck over the border, that then walk through miles of Camp Pendleton, which is the military base there, the Marines, and then they get into, once they cross that into out of San Diego County, they're in Orange County. And Orange County has always been very quiet. John Wayne Airport, Disneyland. And then they move up further north to Los Angeles County because it's big, it's massive. And just so you find work and you find places to hide, space. And this Latino-related, these Latino-related incidents are overwhelming these counties, but in particular Los Angeles County. I mean, pro-life alone. We had to have major protests, if you will, because the left set up 3 abortion clinics in the same corner in this Latino community to kill their offspring. That's their answer to everything. Let's sneak them in. Let's open the borders, but let's kill their kids. And abortion for the Latino community, especially the Mexican, was a horrible shame. And it's not just the Mexicans that are pouring over the border there in Los Angeles or that making their way to Los Angeles, because you can walk up. I had friends that actually got caught trying to sneak their cousin in from Belize because there's no water to cross. So you can drive. Take you a while, but you can just drive and keep driving. And at a certain point, we get to Tijuana, just stick them in the trunk and get by if you can. Pay off one of the border guys, talk to them in Spanish a little bit, and wink your eye, and you get on up in there. And it's been happening for so long that the Los Angeles Unified School District is now 3/4 Latino. And their dropout rate, those that are coming across our border just to be free and work and maintain traditional families, their dropout rate is an alarming 50%. It's right next to blacks. Out of wedlock birth rates in the Hispanic community for Hispanic women is now 53%. So, when we try to compare what's happening today with those who came, they hoist the banner of the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island and American tradition of immigrant, we're trying to remember the time. We're mixing apples with oranges. Because we should remember that when immigrants who passed through Ellis Island at the early part of the last century, we should remember that the federal government accounted for about 3% of the American economy. Today, the federal government accounts for about 25% of the American economy. Part of the package deal that comes with showing up in the United States today is our welfare state, as well as our free economy. So we can't have a comprehensive bill without acknowledging this. We can't pretend that these folks are just paragons of virtue, innocent victims, all in one sweep. No, we have to sort through our law. And what are we going to do? Change the 14th Amendment to say, okay, if you come in even for our workers with a worker's permit, just for the time we need you to pick our berries and fruits and go home, what are we going to do? Put a chastity belt on them? Because if they birth a child, that child is an American citizen availed to all parts of our free country, free economy, and welfare state. Illegal status is temporary because the children who are born here in the United States are U.S. citizens. And a significant demand then becomes a part of our tax dollars in the way of our schools, our health care, our governmental services, including law enforcement. So people that say, there they go again, the religious right and the extreme, protesting what is all about fairness, should be about freedom, should be about civil rights. No, they're actually opening their eyes and saying, let's be real. We're the ones that love the immigrant. We're the ones that work in the hospitals and take care of them. We're the ones that run the crisis pregnancy centers and the homeless shelters. We're the ones that volunteer our time to help the poor. Don't you go throwing the social justice word at Christian people. Christians are social justice. They give their time, their talent, their resources over and above the $400 billion that the federal government confiscates to put in these poverty programs that aren't working. It's the Christian community that then gives away another $300 billion in this country and another $300 billion abroad. It's the Christian community that people like my Daniel and my Gerald put their vacation time on the calendar a year in advance so that they can go and volunteer time in a foreign country to do Christian activism and work, to care for the poor and the needy. Now, this isn't about poverty. This isn't about racism. This isn't about bigotry. This is about protecting the interest of people who say, we have laws, we have rules, and we need to be responsible with those. Yes, let's encourage freedom. But freedom is a privilege and a responsibility. And we already have enough American citizens who think it's all about entitlement. So what we have to do is say, wait, how are you going to come up with a comprehensive bill? Before you start running out in front of the media cameras and telling us that we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, and anybody else that says, wait, what is it you're doing, put us all on defense to say, well, we just want to know what's in the bill. And we're going to demand this time to know what's in the bill before you pass it. You start to dribble out a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Well, when I come back from break, I'm going to tell you about some of the dribble out. and what's going on in this comprehensive immigration reform, that obviously the big protests that were here in Washington think it's only about the 11 million people living in the shadows illegally. So the Gang of Eight are going to force their colleagues, the rest of the senators, to put up an immigration bill, to go in front of media cameras and say, look, we did it, guys. Everything is fine. It'll be finalized soon, and you guys will be just happy. And then with the part of the Congress that has the purse, the House side, for those of you that don't follow political, might not know the division of the government, the Senate can't fund it. That's the House side. So for someone in the House just to say, well, we got to look at how much this thing is going to cost. When the media throws a camera in their face and says, well, what do you think? Are you going to vote for the bill? How do you feel about it? Well, I'd like to know what's in it first. How are you going to ask me what if I'm going to vote for it? And I want to know how much it's going to cost. Which of you would go out and build a building without first sitting down and counting the cost? Inside the Beltway here with Star Parker on Urban Family Talk. Tweet me at Star Parker. Facebook me at Star Parker for Freedom, or visit Urban Cure. I'll be right back. Hey, it's Inside the Beltway with Star Parker here on Urban Family Talk. It's good to be with you. I am just enjoying bringing light into the political here in Washington, D.C., and hopefully bringing light to you. Thank you for allowing me to be with you wherever you are doing whatever you're doing, that I'm able to share a little bit of information with you, because our lives touch. And Inside the Beltway, I want to show how our lives touch in public policy, that we can get clear policy and laws so that there will be peace in the land. And so Inside the Beltway, we'll be looking at 4 things: traditional values, limited government, free markets, and strong national allegiance and defense. And that's probably why I'm so passionate on this issue of immigration reform today, because, you know, when you think about a strong national allegiance and defense, you got to at least, you know, say that there are laws that govern certain countries, and we're going to respect those laws. I'm going to come into that country and I'm going to submit myself to the authority of that country. I'm not going to be offended that they wave an American flag and then put up my flag. Or war in public policy to get them to not be able to put up their flag anymore so that I won't be offended. Or to take Christianity out of their schools so that I won't be offended. No, when you go into somebody else's country, you find out what the rules are, what even the culture is, so that you're not offensive, especially if we're going to be Christians. And as Christian people, our lives touch each other and the secular world. So in a country like ours, as free as it is, it has to be responsible, and there have to be some limits to our behaviors, and there has to be some consistency to law and to what we believe. And the only way you're going to do that is through public policy. And so we have to be engaged. And so I'm just pleased to have this opportunity to try to engage you on some real difficult questions that we hear all the time here in Washington, and need you to weigh in on. Because if the foundations are destroyed, the psalmist said, what will the righteous do? And I sometimes say, I don't know, Lord, what will we do? I really don't want to live in an underground church. I mean, I really appreciate that people live in an underground church. I appreciate people that after, you know, their Christianity has to be expressed in prison. I get letters often from prisoners who would say, I wish I heard your story before, you know, a long time ago, because then I might not have done the crime that I did to have to now spend this kind of time in jail. But I'm living a Christian life, even in jail. Would you send me your book? Would you send me your, you know, these types of things? We get little letters. Some of them little love letters. We don't answer those. But there's, you know, I mean, people get caught up in lies of the left. And when it comes to some of this that we talk about in Washington, what they've been doing lately is making it very comprehensive. So it's very difficult to follow and understand, because others have lives. You know, most people in America are just decent people in quiet communities trying to do what they can by their families and friends. Amazing people in this country. I was saying last week that I went to the 50th state. I've been to every state in the union because a month ago I was able to go to North Dakota and work in pro-life with them. And wow. I said, wow, I'm in every single state I've been to. And it's just wonderful and fascinating to meet just the wonderful people of this land who are just trying to piece it together. And in fact, someone tweeted me on this immigration discussion that we're having today here on Inside the Beltway. And they want to know why does everything have to be so huge and complicated? Why not one or two small changes at a time to see how that goes? Yeah, that's a practical question that the American people are probably scratching their head to say, why would we try to overhaul everything? It's kind of like when you clean your house. I mean, you pull everything in the middle of the room, it's trouble. Oh, do one room at a time. It's a little easier that way. But no, Washington likes it because one of the challenges is that our elected officials have become celebrities. We have a 24-hour news cycle. They spend a lot of time in the makeup chair, in the news green room, and then in the front of the camera to talk about the wonderful things that they're doing on behalf of the people. So if they can try to be comprehensive in that, because when you get into details, then you might lose some friends. Because now they're saying, wait, you want to do what? And it's real simple. And you can comprehend it. So it's huge and complicated so that you go on about your life. And then you end up with, well, now that we're reading it, ooh. And then we end up here in Washington with a world of lobbyists and other interests. And this town starts to boom. I mean, this is boom town out here. I'm telling you, every restaurant is full. The rents, 500 square feet for a couple of $1,000s. Yeah, you heard me. 500 square foot apartment for a couple of $1,000s. Now, I don't mind that in Paris or in Manhattan. I don't even mind in Los Angeles. Because when people are using their own money and their business is built by their own hand, that's one thing. But when every bit of the interest is government related and government touched, and so that means that, we keep the party going on by taking from the American people to keep things getting bigger and more comprehensive and more huge and complicated, that's where I have a problem. And that's what's happening here. And so it's just on and on. And so then you have a Tea Party that says, well, maybe we should take a look into this. And let's cast out everything that's not constitutional. Oh, that person lives the lonely life. Those Tea Party candidates that were sent up here a couple of years ago, they live lonely lives. They live marginalized. And if they stay here too long, they become like Lot in Sodom. I remember when him and Abraham separated themselves is because God was blessing them. And they grew and grew and grew, and they needed to move a little bit away from each other. And so Lot pitched his tent toward Sodom. Next time we saw Lot, he was living in Sodom. And he was having fun. And when them angels showed up, it was like, what? Oh, I didn't notice. Oh, sorry, didn't notice. Oh, man, I got to give it up now. Oh, and these politicians, I got to tell you, most of them don't give it up. When they lose their seat, especially the Tea Party, when the Tea Party came in and started cleaning out, because judgment begins at the house of the Lord. So they started in their own party to clean it out with their eye focused on who they know is the real problem, those liberals on the left that have taken up power and shop for a long time, passing all this stuff. We didn't get here overnight to have to now try to do comprehensive reforms to get us out. No, I agree with this Twitter. It should be small incremental changes to get out of it. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. So when they say comprehensive, because they know that then it's not going to work. First of all, it probably won't even pass. And then when it does pass, you have to find out what's in it. Like what happened with health care. It passed. And believe you me, it would have passed with Republicans had the Tea Party not shown up, because I was here. I heard the scuttlebutt in the back rooms. I've seen what they do when they go out together. Reminds me of what my colleague told me years ago, the conflicts for the crowd. Because at the end of the day, they're in business, and they're in the same business. Their children grow up together. And when your children grow up together, you are friends. And so that was interrupted a little bit, and light was shined in on, and the Tea Party started cleaning out a few of the people that were supposed to be their own. And so now, we have this situation where it's like, if it's comprehensive enough, then maybe people won't notice. And that's how we ended up with Obamacare. And even though only the left voted for it, because the Republicans were, had a spotlight on them, so they said, oh, we'll just lockstep and say no. We ended up with it now. 2 years later, 3 years later, we look inside and we're finding out that it changes everything in the healthcare world. Every promise that Barack Obama made that the healthcare reform bill wouldn't do was a lie. every one of the promises, from you can keep your own doctor to this won't cost you. And now all of the people who have interests that relate to healthcare, from the medical device makers to the hospitals to the doctors to the, you name any area of healthcare, they've got a lobbyist here in town because they're going to protect their interest. And that's how this stuff goes. And now in immigration reform, you can believe that the thousands of immigrants and activists, it wasn't just them. It was their unions. It was all their interest. You could believe that even the associate, I just guess off the top of my mind, you could believe that the Farmers Association was there. Because the farmers, the people that are planting the berries and wanting somebody to pick the berries, they're going to make sure that their interest is secure. And that's some of this talk that we're hearing now. That's why when they say a bipartisan group of senators, known as the Gang of Eight, you should right there say, wait a minute, if the two of you can come up with an agreement, there's something wrong already. Because you got one side of one interest and one side on the other interest. So when you have the middle, what they say, the middle of the road, that's roadkill. Mm-hmm. No, they put together this framework, they say, and they also say that we've been waiting for it. No, I think most Americans in the heartland, and especially in the border states, aren't waiting for some big comprehensive reform plan. No, they've been waiting for border security. They said, let's find a way to shut the border, to stop the flow, and then we'll talk. And there's really nothing wrong with that approach. It should be, and that is a small change. Why can't they just do that one thing first? We need more border guards and it's going to be very costly. You know, with today's technology, if I can keep dogs out of my front yard with this new stuff that they tell me, just sprinkle around the edges, then surely we can come up with some type of device or some invisible fence that keeps people that shouldn't come in out of the country. We have ways for them to get into our country. We have others that are waiting for their families to get into this country that are living under extreme circumstances
America,
and situations.
We're trying to keep it that way.
And they might say, well, Mexico's extreme circumstances situation too. They need our help.
And
no, they're a democracy. They can reform their own country.
Here on Urban
there is no reason. And in fact, if we keep going the way that we are in America, our country will look like Mexico. And I'm not talking about ethnically or because too many immigrants have come in. I'm talking about laws that are so lax and so left-wing that you have dictators in charge.
And that's why we're moving inside the Beltway, right here in Washington, D.C.
One size fits all school system. No wonder our school system doesn't work. That's Mexican school system.
Engaged as Christian people,
we will be living third world very rapidly here.
The scripture's clear.
If we keep this redistribution, we're going to take from the haves and give to the have-nots. We're going to take from the productive and give to the unproductive. The productive will leave.
Government cesspools we call schools.
When you look at the economic scale of which countries are freer, a couple of people put those out every year to show you who's free, where money lives and grows healthily. America fell. We used to be like number 1, then we went to 3.
Today I want to continue a discussion we started yesterday.
A whole lot of countries. We might think that we're so wonderful and great.
View of how we are in
God
this
has still
cultural collapse.
shed His grace on us.
We are in a nation of
I tell you, we better turn this thing around and real quickly here,
so that we can move ourselves to.
Or we're gonna have some serious challenges.
So we can start thinking together.
And if we're going to tackle immigration reform, there should be an agreement at the outset on the objectives. And in my view, there should be 3 objectives. And they should enhance freedom, fairness, and security of our nation. And if they don't do that, why bother? And I'm not sure that this Gang of Eight has made gain on any of these fronts. And I know at least one on fairness, they're making a bad situation worse. Because if they're coming up with an agreement between big business and unions regarding hiring of unskilled foreign labor, and they're going to go around what they trap everyone else in this country in terms of minimum wage laws and all these other labor laws that keep vitality out of our urban centers, then they're going to have a challenge. Because I'm going to object to it. And I don't know how loud my voice can be. But they're talking about government bureaucracy.
When righteous men rule,
Because as our
people
nation
are
buckles
at
under the
peace.
load
And
of
so we wanna make
excessive
sure that we
government,
have
the
people here in
proposals that are
Washington
involved,
are
that
at
we're
least a
hearing
little
about
righteous.
now,
We have
that involve
opportunity
giving
to
Washington more
vote.
power
You know, if you want to like me,
and building
you wanna
yet
be
another new
involved in our
government
discussion,
bureaucracy.
I'm only on 1 hour a day, but
Well,
it'll
they're
go
gonna hear at
viral,
least
and
from
you
me.
can always catch up with
And I'm
me.
hoping to hear from you.
But if you want
They're
to like
actually
me
calling
on Facebook,
for
then you can
plans
go to Facebook.com
for a new
Star Parker
Bureau
for
of
Freedom.
Immigration
If you want to Twitter
and
me, then
labor
you
market
just Twitter
research.
at Star Parker or sign up for our
If you haven't been
newsletter
in Washington, you need to come to this city.
urbancure.org. I
You
run
will
the
see
Center
a
for Urban Renewal and
bureau
Education
of,
here in Washington,
and you list
D.C.
the
We're a
name there
policy think tank
for
where we talk about traditional
everything.
values. We
It's
promote these ideas, traditional
unbelievable
values.
sometimes. I don't mean to
limited
laugh
government,
at it,
free
but
market, strong
for people that are new,
national
they, oh, what's
defense.
that bill?
And we
It's
want you to do that
one
with us, and that's what this
governmental
show is all
idea
about.
after
It's sponsored
another.
by Cure. It's on the Urban
Excessive
Family Talk
government.
radio, and I'm looking forward
You
to
take that little
enjoying
$3 trillion
a lot of time with
budget
you.
and
I
you
think
say
right
we
now
got to
we'll
take
be doing
$85
Tuesday,
billion
Wednesday,
out of
Thursday,
it.
and I'll build out and see if we can
And they
do it every
act
day.
like the sky fell.
But I really appreciate that you're with
We have
me
to
today,
shut
and that you
White
will
House
get some of your
tours
friends
for
to
our
be with us as
students.
well, because we are looking at this
I mean,
cultural
half these
war.
buildings,
I was talking
if they just
yesterday about
rented
how
the
we are a
space
split
out on the
nation.
top floor,
We're a nation
they'd have the
right at
$5
a
billion
similar
off
point
to
where
offset
Abraham
the
Lincoln was
loss.
when he looked into the scriptures
'Cause they don't
in
fill 'em up.
1850 and said,
It just
"A
seemed
house
like a good
divided against
idea
itself can't
to
stand."
build it
And
out.
so we can't do
Why
this anymore.
another
We can't be half free and
bureaucracy
half slave.
at a
We've got
time
to
when
make some
we have
decisions
trillion-dollar
on how we're going to
deficit.
unify ourselves as a people.
Trillions
in thinking
of
about the
dollars of
news out of even the
deficit.
Republican Party,
And
which
then
is
they're
supposed to
talking
be the
about quotas.
opposition
Oh, we'll
party,
talk
that
about
they
it.
cannot determine,
I'll probably have to do a whole
to
nother
be
show
the
on it.
party of Lincoln, who says no.
You know, these
we've got
quotas
to
can be
set
adjusted over
boundaries
time
over our
in
existence.
market
We've got
conditions.
to have
This is what this
laws that are
bureau is going to
consistent
be
with the
talking about.
scripture.
This is what they're
And
going to be
we
now
as a
doing.
nation are moving away from that, and
I
in the
think
political
maybe we
process,
should look
having
into
trouble
this
finding an opposition
immigration
party
bill
that agrees with
once it
itself
hits.
that we need to
'Cause they're
fight
gonna change
on the other
this.
side, the liberals who've engaged us in a
law on
aggressive
us. They're going to
war.
reform.
We are
They're going to
in
come up
this
with
aggressive
something.
cultural
And it
war
could
for
be
the very
really
heart and
comprehensive.
soul of our country.
And it could be really
And the reality
problematic,
is,
like
there
Obamacare
are
and the
just not enough
financial services
warriors.
bill
There are just
that
not
we know
enough
is
people that
Dodd-Frank.
are saying, "I'm concerned."
And once you
liberals have
get into the
always
details, you find
pretended
out
that they're
that
against
truly
war,
the
but they
devil
started 3
is
wars
there.
against our culture, and they've been raging since
And
the
those
60s.
of us that
and our nation
know
is
that we're not
suffering
wrestling against
deeply
flesh and
today
blood,
as a result of it. And the opposition party doesn't
should
want to
be
talk about it,
engaged.
so I'm going to talk about it.
Well, we're
I'm
going to end
talk
up in a
about,
country
number
where our
one, the secular
grandchildren
liberal
won't have the
left
same
declared
values that
war
we
on
have because they
religion.
won't
They weakened
have
our
grown up
public
in a country.
institutions and
Danny
opened the
reminded
door
me
for
earlier when
a
I compared
culture
this to
of
what happened with the
corruption.
TSA.
Now, you'll think there's a
You know,
culture
what's
of
happening in the gun
corruption,
debate.
and how is it that the very people
These young
that make
people,
our laws, our
didn't know
lawmakers here in Washington, are at 13% approval? My goodness, if you can't trust the people who are making the laws, we have work to do. But we've scrubbed our schools of all reference to God. I mean, in 1962, the Supreme